Jack, can you tell me something about the gold days in Dunolly that you remember?
The gold about the notice and things like that. Well, there's a list of them on that board there.
What do you remember about gold in Dunolly when you were a small boy?
Well, when I was only a boy, there used to be crowds of people here, the miners and their wives around the town. And in this main street here, Dunolly, a Saturday night was late shopping night. And us boys couldn't walk up and down that footpath. We had to walk in the gutter to the crowds of people walking up and down the street. Everybody, especially the women in their Sunday dresses, just parading up and down, showing off, or window shopping. But us boys, well, there was no real hooligans amongst us. There might have been a few around the town, but most of us boys about my age, those early days, was quite good boys. And we had the black and white lodge to the Wesleyan heads of the town. They run this here lodge, and there'd be about 12 or 14 of us boys joined up there. And then in 1909, I think it was, the Church of England minister started a Boy Scout movement. And I had to wait for a few weeks for I turned 12 years of age to join up as a Boy Scout. Well, that only went a period that minister was here for 2 or 3 years, and then the Boy Scout movement broke up. But there's no records in Melbourne, even in the Boy Scouts history, of Boy Scouts being formed in Victoria before 1914, at the First World War, as the records show, when Boy Scouts and Girl Guides was first formed in 1914. And I've had several of the scoutmasters in different areas to trace up in Melbourne to go through the records, but there's no trace whatever of Boy Scouts in Dunolly or anywhere else before 1914. Now, I claim to be the oldest living Boy Scout probably in Australia, and also the only man-girl guide, because it would be about 10 years ago, the district commissioner of Girl Guides, and I'd done a lot for Girl Guides, and especially for the Boat Club, and they made me an honorary member of the Boat Girl Guides. So that only a thing, when the commissioner asked me if I had any objection to becoming a Girl Guide, I says, no, as long as you don't make me wear the dresses. So with that caused quite a laugh with them. Well, since then, over the years, I've done a power of work, both the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides, and I've got the collar at home with about a dozen different badges from different Girl Guide groups, especially in South Australia, Renmark, Barmera, Wakely, Loxton, and all those towns. The Girl Guide groups from there that I helped out, they all presented me with one of their badges to put on the collar.
Jack, tell me more about the gold in the days around, 1910?
Yeah.
What were the people? What were they going for with the gold? Were they panning for gold, or were the mines here?
The early gold rushes, the first one that I can remember, was the Poseidon rush out near Tarnagowa. That started in 1906 and went into 1912. My dad worked in the mines out of Poseidon for 5 years, and the biggest nugget he got was 105 ounces, and that's the biggest piece of gold ever I've had in my hand. And being a boy, I was still going to school then, and the crowd of people, all the miners half the town, was down here in front of the town hall. And us boys, Stitty Beacon, couldn't make out what the crowd was about. And then my dad spotted me and he said, here, take this home to your mother. I held out my hands because it hit my hands and finished up on the ground. They couldn't hold it. No hope in life. People get the shock of their lives. We had a nugget as big as your hand. You're lucky if you can lift it, right? Because the gold is the heaviest thing in the world. Put other metals in the shade. 12 ounces to the pound for gold.
What would life have been like for your father as a miner? Was he working for a company, or was he...
No, there was 4 of them right there, of the dad and another Dunolly man, and the other two were from Sydney, and one of them was a policeman. He resigned from the police force in Sydney to come over here to go on the gold on the Poseidon Rush. And for the first 2 or 3 years, they were getting wages or a bit more out of it, doing all right. But then towards the end of it, and this chap that with retired policeman, he turned round and he'd sent a wire home to his wife in Sydney to say that he'd be home next week, that the gold had cut out. They were getting practically nothing, eh? Well, at any rate, the dad was the one that was down the shaft digging, and his mate, the man named Hoppy, old Dunolly I, was up on top of the windmill. And at any rate, the dad dug this 106-ounce nugget out, and he gave the signal, whistled out to his mate up on top, and he sat in the rope, and when he come up to the top, he was sitting there with this big nugget in his hand. And the bloke, for a moment, let the windlass go. The dad said, "Oh, this is the end of it. 50 feet to drop down to the ground." But the chap grabbed the windlass before it got away and checked it. So at any rate, they got up, and a bit of a he went around the diggings, and of course everybody flooding up. And this ex-policeman bloke, he was down in the billiard saloon, and somebody went rushing in there. "Oh, another nugget's found up the deep lead, another. Oh, who's the lucky cows this time?" And this bloke said, "Oh, cocky something." He said, "Not hockey." "Yeah," she said. "Oh, God," he said, "I'm in there." He chucked his hat up in the billiard room, and off he went to, left his hat there. And he had a look, and he come back, he had to go to play, send a wire to his wife, then struck gold, won't be home for a while. But those are the sort of things that went out. When a big nugget was found, the whole area knew about it. And they all, I suppose, all had a drink on the strength of it. Yeah. But a lot of the early miners, they didn't value their money. They'd get a big nugget, they'd come into Dunolly, and they'd cash it in at the bank or the gold buyer, and they'd shout for everybody in the town. They'd stop in the town drinking until all that money was gone. They'd think, "Oh, I can go out tomorrow and get another one." The poor devils in a fortnight time probably dying of starvation. They never had enough to buy a loaf of bread. And it's the same today. There's odd people who are lucky enough touch to find a nugget in the last 10 or 15 years rather with a detector. It's only 1 in 5,000. All the rest of the people that's walking around with the detectors or digging are only wasting their time. Because the last 5 out of 6 gold nuggets that's been brought into this museum, 5 out of 6 is West Australian gold. They buy it and make out they're finding it around there. The last chap that brought one in here, 5-ounce piece a few months ago, a lovely nugget, he pulled it out of his pocket and gave it to me, and I looked at it. As soon as ever I seen it, I knew where it come from. I can tell the colour of it, eh? And I said, "Where'd you find this nugget?" And, he says, "I found it yesterday out in the bush." He says, "I'm camped down here in the caravan park." And I says, "You did?" He says, "Yeah." I says, "Whereabouts?" "Oh, I'm not telling you." He says, "I'm going out tomorrow to look for more." I said, "You got a long way to go." And he didn't wake up that I was having a crack at it. So, at any rate, we talked for a while. And I says, "You won't tell me where you got that nugget?" No, he says, "No, I won't." I said, "Would you like me to tell you where you got it?" He jumped around. He said, "Who told you? Who told you?" "I don't remember telling anybody." I said, "Perhaps you didn't, but I happen to know." "How do you know?" I said, "You never found that around here." "Yes, I did. Yes, I did." I said, "No, you didn't. You bought that because that's West Australian gold." He stood there with his mouth open for about 2 minutes, and I've never seen or heard of him since.
Tell me more about the town in those days, Jack.
Well, the main street of Dunolly in the mining days was just about 3 miles long. But there was no brick buildings. It was all canvas or hessian, or bags, anything at all, right both sides of the street. And any of the decent shops had a decent sign up in front, a canvas sign, grocery or drapery or whatever it may be, to let the people know. But the street was lit up with slush lamps. That was 6-pound jam tins full of fat and a big wicking. And they stood on posts up and down the main street. And the lamplight would go around and light these wicks up after sundown, right? And the miners then would clock into the town from all round, and the miners and their wives and girlfriends, they'd be dancing out here in the main street. It was only gravel then. and they danced there to an old violin or any music that I could go on at all. They were happy until those flush lamps would start to go out about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning before the dancers would get up and go home. But it was a happy-go-lucky life for them, yet any amount of them never found enough gold in those days to live on. A lot of people were practically starving. When I was a boy, and back in the old days, you'd go out rabbit trapping and do a bit of digging one thing another. And many a day I went to school with a round of bread, a high king loaf of bread with dripping on it. Never had jam and no butter, bread and dripping. And Mum would give the brother and I a penny to go to the baker's shop. You'd get a yeast bun nearly as big as the 2 or 3 of them today for 8p each. The big yeast bun, that was the brother and our dinner. No cat lunches or anything. Just what you could buy, a yeast bun with your meat. So that half the children in the school in those days were only half big.
Can you tell me more about the school, Jack? Your
The
school
school was
days?
Dunolly. They're still there. They've added on to it and had more rooms put on and so on. But there used to be, I think, 5 or 6 classes there. And I was only in the fourth class. I had a broken arm. I had diphtheria and bilious attacks nearly every week. Nearly half my time, school days, was at home, playing the wag or in bed sick to me, so that I never got over past the 4th class. There was 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th classes. And I never got past the 4th class. And after I'd left Dunolly School, I finished up going to Bromley School. And the day before I turned 14, I said to the head teacher down there, I want all my books tonight because I'm 14 tomorrow and I'm not coming to school anymore. No, he said, well, I'm going to write a letter to your father. And I want you to take it home and give it to him, which he did. So 10 or 8 nights I read over and Dad read it. And he said, well, the head teacher wants you to go back to school. He says, only this last few months you've come on like a house on fire, learning terrific. Eh? So he wants you to go back to school. He'll push you, make an effort to push you along and put you through for a school teacher. And I said, well, that's the end of it. That's the last thing in the world. I want to be a school teacher, not in the life. Oh, well, you'll have to get a job. So I got a job down here at the paper shop, $5 a week, working 8 or 9 hours a day for $5 a week. You'd be get up there at 8 o'clock in the morning, you had to put all the signs out on the front, the nature strip for people to read, the Age, Argus, Weekly Times and so on, and sweep the shop out, sweep the front street out, and raise all the books, everything in the shop had to be rearranged, set up, until the paper train never used to get into Dunolly for about 12 o'clock. And the old cabby used to drive a covered-in cab and a horse in it, and he'd pick up the mail from here, take that down to the station. He'd pull up often at the paper shop where I worked and yell out, and I'd rush out and jump in the back, and away he'd go down to the station, and he'd chuck the mail bags out, and then when the train pulled up, the papers would be chucked out of the guard's van and the mail chucked out. He'd gather up the mail bag, put them in the cab, and I had one pass for the papers I used to have to open out for the people at the station. All the neighbours would come and get their papers there. The rest was thrown up into the cab, and he never used to shop. Go past the paper shop, he chucked these bundles of papers out in the street. There'd be about a chain of them along the road. I had to go out and gather them up after, and then go in and make up a round to do the main street, deliver them to all the shops and people in Broadway, go back and make up another lot to do all North Dunolly and right up to the cordial works. I didn't mind up there because every day at the cordial works I'd get a bottle of lemonade. I'd stand at the door and the paper, you stand there for, oh, Mr. Whittaker, I can see you standing there laughing, you know. And they'd say, oh, you're waiting for a drink, Jack. I'd say, yes, Mr. Whittaker. Oh, I do, huh? I never went through without me drink. Those bottles of those times, it was threepence a bottle. I mean, to buy in the shop was threepence for a bottle of lemonade or whatever you wanted. And us boys, 'cause pennies were scarce even in those days, and 3 of us, we'd club together at school, till we got a penny each. That's threepence, right. Now we got enough to buy a lemonade, a bottle of lemonade. Not for the lemonade, for the marmalade, eh? So we'd each have a pull at this lemonade, and when we drank that, we'd break the bottle. This time I'd take the marble, and next time the other bloke could take it, and the next time he'd make it. So that we were getting our drink and our marbles to play marbles with out of the threepenny bottle of drink. And that was great fun. The marbles was the main thing of the lot. But I think when I was about 10-year-old, we used to play shinty at school with a big lump of timber out of the bush with a knob on it, and tins. Built the tins up and down the school ran, you see. Teams, we'd have a team, like hockey and that is today. And anyway, I got a crack on my back one day with one of these shinty sticks, so I can just remember it. I thought, oh, gee, that hurt me. Never thought any more about it. But just before I was 12 years of age, and it was over a mile from our place to the school, walking backward and forward, and all at once I started to get lame, dragging me their foot along, couldn't get along. Dad took me up to the hospital and the doctors went over it. No, they couldn't find out what was wrong with me. They took the heavy boots off and put shoes on me, and I hated that. I didn't want to be a girl wearing shoes. And at any rate, there was a young doctor. He lived up in the house that used to be the warden's house, I think, in the early days, and he was living there as a local tenant and the main doctor up at the hospital, old Dr. Warpen. And he said to the dad one day, look, bring young Jack up to my private house. I'd like to go over him and see if I can locate what the trouble is. So he took me up there, stood me off, and I lay on the table in his surgery, and he went and he had his big doctor's book on the table alongside of it. And he examined here, and he'd go back to the book, do a bit there, and then back again. And after about 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, he said, I think I found what the trouble is. An abscess in the groin of the leg. So at any rate, I had to go up to the hospital next day, and the old Dr. Wolfram, he got onto it, and they had like big darning needles, steel pin, driving them into my legs to locate where this abscess was. And oh, look, it was dynamite. He was a German doctor, old Dr. Wolfram, and he didn't know what pain was himself. He was the biggest coward out. But he could torture other people to death without winking an eye, I think. And they used to give me, putting these big needles into my leg. And that went on for several days. And then they were trying to locate if that abscess was right. They had to get to a certain stage. Eh? All right, then they decided they'd operate in a few days. So at any rate, they took me into the operating theatre, and it was the old heather in those days. They put a paper bag over your mouth. Now breathe heavy. For about 3 breaths, and I was out to it. Well, I was on the operating table for 3 hours while they took that abscess out. And I'd like to show you the marks there now. I reckon they cut it out with a sword and stitched it up with a bag of needles. They stitched bags of chaff up with. About 6 stitches in about a 6 or 8 inch gap in my leg. And they put a cup and a half of wax in the hole. They took the abscess out. And they should have had another half a cup in to fill that up because there's a big hole there now. But it's never given any trouble to any extent since.
Can you tell me anything about, were there many Chinese people lived around here?
Yes, there was a lot of Chinamen. In the early mining days, I don't remember them in hundreds, but there was 5,000 Chinamen here on the Burnt Creek in the very early mining days. There was a boat load of them came from China. The captain of the boat, all the crew and all the other Chinamen, they run the boat ashore on the sand somewhere down Portland Way, left the boat stranded and all hiked over here to Dunolly on the goldfield. And
do you remember many of the Chinese yourself? Did you have many friends?
Oh yes, there was quite a few of them at little vegetable gardens down near the railway station. And there used to be 2 big Chinese shops there, but they were not operating as far as I can remember. One of them was the hotel, the Terminus Hotel that remains with the just down over the railway. That was a Chinaman, Hai Yi, that ran him and his wife, and then his married daughter ran it for years after. And the main Chinese were over the road and a block of ground that went down towards where the silo is, and there was either 5 or 6 little Chinese gardens there. They had little huts built and used to grow a few vegetables to shelter the people. And us boys, for sixpence, you get a watermelon bigger than your head. And us boys, it's a birthday to go into one of the old China and buy a big watermelon, take it out and sit in this gutter there and chop it up and eat it. Oh, it was a birthday party. But they gradually died off. The last one, he had a nice hut facing out on the main road. There's a nice house on it there now, this side of where the brother lives, almost opposite Ying's Hotel. And Scon was his name. He's about the tallest Chinaman ever I seen. He was 6 foot or 6'1" or 2", straight up and down, the old Chinaman. And at any rate, some of the Wesleyan people in the church persuaded him to come to church. They converted him into a Wesleyan, presented him with a lovely Bible, and every Sunday morning he used to get clean, Sunday suit on, and he bought himself a brand new pair of boots just to go to church, and he never wore them otherwise, only Sunday going to church. And Sunday morning he'd always be the last one into church. Everybody else would be sitting down, the parson ready to start the service, and Scon would come marching in the front door, and these boots creak, 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 like down he had the queue down in the front of the church. And everybody had to laugh at the children as I was gone, trying to sneak down, and these beats squeaking every step he took. Well, to finish up, I was working at the blacksmith shop down the street at the period, and one day there was a hectic commotion out in the street, and I went running out to see what was wrong, and just poor old Scon, he'd gone off his head, right in the middle of the street. He chucked his hack down, and he was running round and round with that devil come. Well, somebody rang the police. The police come down and got him and took him away, put him in the asylum. And he was about the last of the Chinamen that I can remember. But there was quite a lot of them around here that remained, was quite good fellows.
You tell me that there's an old house near the school that's made out of kerosene drums. You don't know anything about that?
Yes, well, there used to be lots of homes around here along the creek and out in the bush, was made from kerosene tins. They came from the soap factory down here on the creek. Peterson and Son's big soap factory was there. And the tins of soap used to be sent from all up the valley, from far and wide, down by train, to the soap factory. Because people in those days, all the farmers killed their own sheep, and they rented all their fat down. When they got the kerosene tin of fat, they sent it by train. It didn't cost them about a shilling's freight to send it from all up the valley down to the soap factory. And then they get 7 and 6pence, I think, for their kerosene tins full of fat. Well, that's just a lot of good pocket money in those days. At the soap factory, they just used to cut the tins open and tip the fat out, warm it up and tip it into the big vats to make soap out of it and candle. And the tins then would be chucked down the creek or dumped them anywhere out in the bush. Well, people found out how handy they were. I'd done it myself when I was a teenage boy. Go up there with a tomahawk and cut these tins open, flatten them out, and then you'd bundle them up or perhaps put them in the bag and take them over your shoulder and cart them home. And I built a shed for the horse, a stables out of kerosene. And there was dozens of houses on the outskirts of the town that people lived in for years, just made out of kerosene. And if they were built properly and painted over, they looked all right. There's nothing wrong with them. He kept the weather out, and that's all there was to it. Built out of kerosene.
When you were a boy, did many people live in tents at all, or were many houses made of canvas when you were a boy?
Not such a great many in canvas in my days. There's mostly weatherboard places, or pine, little low cottages, low dwelling houses, with hips and rallies, perhaps 2 or 3 hips and rallies. As a couple got married, they might only put up 2 rooms. Well, then when the first child was coming, they'd probably put another 2 rooms onto it. And then a year or 2 after, there'd be another 2 rooms. And it all ups and downs, hips and valleys in the old-fashioned house. And low, a tall person have to hold their head down to get in. So they were built very low. And most of the doors on the house in those days were only about 5'6" high. my old place down there now, go in there. In fact, the policeman here a few years ago nearly knocked his brain out on it, rushing in or rushing out, and bang. And there only a fortnight ago, one of the building crowd, he went rushing out and he nearly knocked his brains out. It's that low down. I can just walk in comfortably because I'm used to it. But a tall person, you couldn't walk in without stooping down.
Can you tell me again about the Indian hawkers that used to be around here?
Well, I can remember probably anything from 6 to 10 or a dozen of them. They used to be, and they used to congregate here in the town about once a month or once in 6 weeks. And there'd be 6 or 8 of those hawkers and all meet at the one place. They had it was a great big tin shed with a brick floor in it, and they put into the backyard and they'd load all their bales of wool and rabbit skins and other fur and the scrap metal, anything that they could buy around the country or get, they used to bring it in. And they used to get me of a Saturday to go down and do the sign writing on their bales of skins and wool that had to be sent by train to Melbourne. And I was a very popular boy with the old Indians. And this old gun to sing when Dunolly went flat and Mildura first started in the early 20s, and half the houses in Dunolly were pulled down in sections, and there'd be a good train leaving Dunolly station one day a week, taking houses from Dunolly to Mildura to be erected up there. And this old gun to sing, the Indian, he bought a lot up around Dunolly and Malagal, including Dr. Fling's house, where Dr. Fling was born at Malagal. He bought that house, and through it, with all the timber from them houses, he built the first guest house in Mildura, in 8th Street, Mildura. A big mansion of a place when it was all assembled, but it was all old timber from the old houses. Well, he sold that and made a fortune, what he got from the syndicate to take it over as a boarding house. Because in those days, the workmen up there in hundreds, Chapey brothers, they were planting up the vines, fencing, putting fences up for the grapevine. There was hundreds of men up there, worked for hundreds, and that nowhere from to go and board, nowhere from to get a meal. Well, old Gundersing built this first big guest house, and he made a fortune out of that. But 8 years after, somebody must have dropped a cigarette, and it went up like a balloon, bang, and it was gone. All the old timber, it was just a cinder. The fire brigade couldn't do a thing with it. It's burnt out in a few minutes.
What about getting around and when you were a boy? How important was the bicycle then? How important was the bicycle in the early days around here?
Oh, the bicycle, well, the bicycle was a boon. And after I'd left school, might have been 15 or 16, there was a bicycle shop down the street next to the cafe that is now. And he done a good trade with us teenage boys that could afford them. A new bicycle was £6, a man's push bike, 5 shillings deposit and 5 shillings a month, I think it was, to pay it all. Something of that sort. Well, old mate and I think I had to lend him a few bob to find his 5 bob to pay a deposit on. But those bikes helped to put us on our feet. We ride around the country, we get jobs out on the farm and knocking suckers out on land with for 2 bob an acre, I think we used to get for knocking suckers and that. And today you'd want more than half a foot to do it. But it was money in hand, cash, to help us pay our bikes short. Well, it didn't take us long working like that, riding out to jobs to pay our bikes short. And any amount of those that could have done the same, they wasn't going to give it a go. But we did. The old mate and I, and sorry to say, old mate, he joined up in the First World War and was shot at the landing at Gallipoli. I enlisted 5 times, but they bunged me out because I had a bad heart. I had rheumatic fever when I was about 20. And every time I enlist and go down to Melbourne or to Maryborough, the doctors used to tell me all. And the last time my brother, Podge, younger than me, just before the end of the war, he enlisted and was in Broadmeadows camp. And I got onto the recruiting sergeant that lived in Maryborough, and I said, look, I want to get into camp with my brother, right? We'd be together. If he's going to get shot, I want to be there. If I get shot, well, he'll be there. Some the other. So he paid the doctor in Maryborough 10 shillings to put me through. It was okay. When we went into his office, the recruiting agent chucked the 10-bob note on the table, and he said to the doctor, "Hello, doctor, this bloke wants to get into camp as board netter." "Righto. You got good eyesight. Can test your eyes. Can you read those letters?" And I had extra good eyesight, right on the right off from top to bottom. My Jesus, you've got extra good sight. And I had good hearing then, but now I haven't. That's my only fault. And, your sound, everything else, yeah, okay, passed me through. All right, had to go to Melbourne. There was 2 or 3 of us at the one time. Went to Melbourne, to the town hall, and they generally from there, they'd send you out to Broadmeadows. But when we got there, the sergeant in charge there, he said, "Oh, look, we can't do anything with you blokes this morning. Be back here at 2 o'clock this afternoon. There's a special check-up going on." Well, we couldn't do anything about it. We had to go back at 2 o'clock, and there was 30 odd of it in the big hall upstairs, running up and down in the nutty, and at last these 2 old grey-whiskered doctors, Booger was, lined us all up, and I was 2 or 3 from the beginning, I think. One doctor come to me, put the stethoscope on me. Anyway, I didn't know. I says, "What?" And he said to the other doctor. It was the way they had to signal one another. Doctors talk, I suppose. And this other bloke come up, tested me. "What sort of bee doctors you got in the bush to send a bloke like you down here?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with me." "Doctor," he says, "you got a bad heart." I said, "Bad heart, me put. There's nothing wrong with me. Put your clothes on and get home and be satisfied." Right? So at any rate, I put my clothes on and I come home. And worse luck for me that I didn't get into camp, because that boatload of soldiers of the brother on, they were 3 days off of England when the armistice was signed. They seen the world. All them soldiers was taken into France, minding prisoners of war, minding munition dumps. They had a holiday and seen the world that the governments expect. And that I was the unlucky one to miss out on that trip. But on the boat, the brother was a starring partner for the AIF champion boxer. They were training him to have a big fight when they arrived in England against the British Army champion, eh? And the brother was one of the sparring partners. Every day, well, perhaps half a dozen times a day, each one of them soldiers that was a sparring partner and have this bloke a fight in training. Right? So, at any rate, the Australian bloke did clean the British bloke up over there in the fight, but it was after, I was 12 months before the brother got home again from there, and he was still in his uniform, and we lived down the flat, and I was teaching the youngest brother, Bert. He's the only one of the brothers alive now out of 5 of it, and there was 2 or 3 lads from the town used to come down to our place, the brothers' mates, and I used to teach them boxing. Nobody ever taught me, but I could teach the kids boxing. And this day, one of the kids had left their ribs open, and I roared them up because they didn't whip a punch into their rib, really. And the brother was there, standing up leaning against the post, still in uniform. And he laughed. He said, I'd like to see you hit me in the ribs. I says, would you? He says, yeah. I says, take your jumper off, come on, put the gloves on, got him out in the ring. We sparred around for a ride, and at last he lifted his right hand up a lick, and I brought my left hand straight. Oh, hurt, he says. That was a surprise. When I says, was it? He said, I bet you can't do it again. And I said, go on, keep going. Of course, I said, he was watching me dirty leg. Sparred around for a while. The next thing I ripped up with my right. Chucked the gloves off. He says, damn you. He says, and never struck a man. He says, on that boat out of 300 odd men that could use one hand as well as the other. He never put the gloves on me after that. But,
Jack, do you remember the first cars in Dunolly? Do you remember the first cars that you would have seen?
Oh, well, yes, the first car that I can remember was a motor buddy. The old doctor up here had it. Oh, it was a woeful thing. Ordinary iron tyres, and on its cart wheels and that, and a single-seater buggy, and the engine was in the back with a double seat. It would have been ordinary time. And the old engines, sometimes you'd crank for half an hour before you get a kick out. Nobody knew anything about it. They were an engine, and that's all there was to it. And then when it did go, to get up and ride in that, well, they were bone shakers by the Lord Harry. Iron tyres and rattling along the rough road, gravel roads of big rocks and holes. Bang, bang, bang. It's a wonder anybody ever lived after riding one of them things. But eventually the old doctor traded that in, I think, and got a T-model Ford. That's when the T-model Fords first come out, 1914, I think it's 12 or 14. And it wasn't too bad. But then in later years, and I'll be good while after, I suppose must have been about 1920. And before that, I'd gone up the Mallee harvesting at harvest time, because you get a big harvest up there, well, around here, you get a couple of weeks all you get. So I got up there, and I had a big harvest, 4 brothers, all worked their farms with cooperation with one another. One helped the other. And I had 5 months' harvest with those brothers. And at any rate, I saved enough money out of that, and I thought, right, now I'm either going to have a good horse, a hack, or a motorbike. And there's an old German bloke working with me there. He do the wee outs from Corach, and he said, well, look, my son over at Corach has got a lovely chestnut horse, and he's got a motorbike. You'll sell either one, both. So at any rate, I rode my push bike out there, and the son was home, and oh yes, come over and have a look at the horse. And he had him in the yard, and I had a look at him, and I walked away. He says, what's wrong? I said, I wouldn't buy him. Oh, what's wrong with him? I says, he kicked the eye out of a needle. Oh, get out. He says, did Dad tell you? I says, no, nobody told me. I said, I can feel it in his eye. I didn't like the look of him. And most chestnuts are treacherous. And yes, you can belt the type out and not that, but well, you can't trust a chestnut altogether. So, no, I said, where's your own motorbike? Well, it was an old TDC belt drive, no starter. You had to run it to start it, then hop on it, and fall over and fall on you. So at any rate, I think that was 20 quid he wanted for this motorbike. So he says, can you ride it? I said, never ever been on one. So he said, well, I'll start it up and take it down the road. So he had to run with it, and when it started, he hopped on, and away he went, down the road and come back to where I was standing. Right, I get on the seat, on the back, that carried it. So I got on the seat, and down the road we went, and going along, I was asking him what this was for, and that was for, and so on. Turned around and come back to near the front gate of the house, and he said, now, you'll never ride. And I said, yeah. So he said, well, you sit on it, hold the clutch up. He said, and I'll push it. And when I tell you to drop the clutch, he said, you get a bit of pace up, then she'll go. Righto, so he went about 10 or 15 yards, and he said, righto, dropped it, and away she went, tut, 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 you know, and he went down the road. He stood there, and I went down the road looking for a big wide place to turn round. I didn't know how big a circle I'd want to turn around. Then right, I found the place was all right, and I turned round, up, and he was down on the middle of the road, and he held his hand up, and I stopped. I could have punched him in the nose when I was shooting him. Boy, gee, you've never been on a motorbike before? He says, no. He says, boy, gee, you can ride as well as I can. I says, yeah. How much? 20 quid. I hid him the 20 quid, and I rode his home. 80-odd miles. Never been on a motorbike in my life before. And the chap that had the bicycle shop here, there was no garages or anything about, and he was a pretty shrewd sort of old bloke, and that's right. And the doctor here then, I think it was an old shed, and the battery in them was a series of dry cells under the floorboards in the front, about a dozen dry cells. And that's what you started them on that, you see, and then switched them on when they'd need. So anyway, this has stuck the old doctor up at the hospital, and he rang Woody Hughes was his name, and Woody said, come on up on your bike, and he had the bike too, that's all we had to get around on. Went up and there, and I looked around the old car, couldn't see anything wrong with it. So he's, look, it's all downhill. If we push it out the gate and down the hill, he said, I can hop in and steer it down to run right to the back of the shop, which it did. So he did, got in the backyard at the shop, went and opened up the shop again, and we were out in the backyard. He was underneath. He had a great habit of getting under a motor car with a pair of flyers with a bit of wire. Anybody put up out in the street something wrong with it, that's all he'd do. What he used to do, I don't know, but he'd fix the up and away she'd go again, eh? And at any rate, he was underneath and I was up on top, and I took the floorboards out and I see all this series of dry shells, and I went over them and one of the wires on that was broken. So I said, you go on, Woody, I think this is the trouble. So he come out and I said, look, shouldn't that wire be joined there? Oh, raw yet. We'd got the soldering iron, come out, solder together, give her a pull. Why, she went right around the end. Eh? But this old Indian, the last one, the top one that ran the town, old Nutter Singh, and he used to be down the town, umbrella on his arm and dressed up like a king, and he must have watched this Woody use more than once. A car pulled up out in front, something rattling or something other, and yet, Mr. Hughes, he gets some pliers, he gets a piece of wire, he's gone underneath the cart, he's twisted on somewhere. How much, Mr. Yet? Or 10 shilling. He had him taken off to a tee. That was his usual charge, his usual job. Where he put the bit of wire around underneath, nobody knows, but he got 10 bob for that. And the way the car went, they never see him again.
What about the, before you had buses,
Yeah.
were there coaches that came to town, or was it?
Well, it was just mostly horse and cart vehicles, the cab, and there was a mail coach used to come from Riola, covered in four-wheel buggy with a cover over it, and 1 or 2 horses in it. And I think he used to come here to Dunolly, and if his horse was tired, he'd change here and go on to Barring Up, other side of Ellington. And he'd get down there probably about dinner time, have his dinner there, and then he'd get back here to Dunolly about 3 o'clock, and on up to Riola, say, back by 4 or 5 o'clock. That was the daily mail run through here. And a lot of people had their either spring carts or double-seater buggies was the main conveyance in those days, or horse and dray. The drays were used for everything, even the main street. There was this sniper, we used to call him, go up and down the street every day with a horse and dray, sweep the rubbish up and get up to the horse would pull up, and a couple of shovelfuls of dirt on, and that would go on every day up and down the street for these horse and dray, keeping the place clean. And it was quite a few years before the rubber tyre digs and flash gigs, motor back gigs came in. There weren't any money people that could afford them, but at the time I was working in the blacksmith shop, and my boss there, he was a wheelwright, and while I was there, he built 2 of these digs. One was for the chemist's son, and look, when that was finished and it was put out on the nature strip in the street for people to see, it was something out of this world. The lion work and the fancy stroll work that man had put on there, and highly varnished over it. You could see your face in it, right down the shafts, the wheels and all the body work there. And the bloke that was built, you come down every day, can't I have my dig now? No, you're not getting it till the end of the week. It's out on show. It was kept out on the front of the street. I had to look out there every morning. It was there till shut-up time at night for the people to see. But he was a wizard at building digs and wheels and things like that. And what I learned from him, even with the wheelwrighting, helped me out a lot. When I opened the first garage down the street here in 1925, and there was 4 motor cars in Dunolly there, and 3 of them were old T-model Fords. So I'd bought an old T-model Ford from a bicycle shop in Maryborough, I think for about 50 quid. It used to be the mail bus in Maryborough, and that's all the running it done for several years, was from the post office to the station, 4 or 5 times a day, backwards and forwards to meet every train with the mail, eh? And at any rate, I'd never ever put my hand on a car, never ever had a ride in one, I don't think.
What were the old T models like to drive?
Well, we'd never drove one before, and I hadn't until I'd bought this one of mine in Maryborough, and the bloke down there, he says, can you drive? I said, I've never had my hand on a car wheel in my life. Eh? I said, I used to ride no motorbike, and otherwise just driving a horse around. So at any rate, got me in the old Ford, and we went out from Maryborough out to Carisbrook Road, and this bloke drove it out. And when we got about halfway to Carisbrook, he pulled up on the sloppery hill of it, and he said, now I'll show you how it reverses back up the hill. Right? All right, that was okay. And had a talk for a while. He said, now, do you want to have a go at driving it? I said, yeah. So he got out, I slipped into his seat, he went around, got in there. He righto, start up. I says, no. He said, why? Well, I said, I want to know a bit about it, Bert. I said, what's this for? What's that for? How do you start it? How do you start it? And all the rest of it. I asked him to make sure. Once he told me, it stuck out of I knew. Started up, away we went. And we got nearly out to Carisbrook, I think, and there was two big elm trees on the side of the road, and the shadow was right across the road. He said, now I want to see how close you can stop to stop in that shadow. He said, I don't say I could do it myself, but see how you go. Anyway, we got down there, and I put the brakes on, and the shadow was right across the vehicle. By Christ, he says, you're pretty good. Yeah, all right, going into Carisbrook, drove round the main streets in Carisbrook, pulled up in Northern Street in front of the bike shop. The other partner come out, and he said, how did he go? He said, I don't know. He said, he reckons never ever drove the car before, but he can drive the damn thing better than I can. Absolutely, he says, I can't believe he's never drove before.
What sort of controls did you have on the T model?
Well, you had your, just one button there for your petrol, I think, and one for the spark, but your gears were the big bands. You pushed it in so far for low gear, then like down the hump the other for second, then let it come right back for top gear, eh? And at any rate, that's the gears were nothing. I got used to them all right. So at any rate, we went in, and I paid him some of the money on it then, and he said, the one part, the other, he says, well, he said, now, you think it's safe to let him drive it up to Dunolly? Eh? He says, he hasn't got a licence. The other bloke said, well, look, young Tommy in the back there, he was a workman there, a bit older than me. He's got his licence. Let him go up to Dunolly with Jack. If they get away now, they'll just get about catch the 4 o'clock train coming back from Dunolly. So righto, so I drove it home, drove him down to the station, put him on the train, drove home. Next morning I went up to the police station. No policeman. Oh, they got a car. Yeah, want a licence. Righto, he hopped in with me. Went up one street, turned around the other, right back to the police station. He said, I never asked you, can you reverse it? I says, yes, I can drive it in here. Went in, it wasn't 2 minutes to get my driver's licence, right? And of course it was after that then that I pulled it all down, and I knew that the car from one end to the other. It had the back axles out, looked at the cram moving pin and everything else, and there was a little bit of inflate in one of the back axles as it go backwards and forwards like that, and over bumpy ground as it caused a bit of a knock. So I said, now what am I going to do with that? Well, what I done, where it's fitted into a sleeve on side in the crown wheel part, a halfpenny just fitted in there nicely. I put the halfpenny in, sweet as a bell. No more knocks and